So Jessica, thank you for taking the time to talk to me and the students at the University of Waterloo today. What you've got to say, I think, is going to be really helpful to them. They're looking particularly at how technology is impacting communities. And what I find especially interesting about what you're doing is that you're focused first on the results that you want to achieve in terms of the impact on the community, in terms of lowering energy costs and helping people manage those better. So, and technology comes second, which I think is what we will explore, but is especially, I think, important for people to see. So I thought I would start by just asking you to talk about Bridgewater. It's a town that I know, I've been there many times, but many people watching won't. So can you please describe Bridgewater, Nova Scotia?
Sure. So Bridgewater is about an hour and a quarter south along the coast from Halifax. It's not directly on the ocean, it's on the LaHave River, and that river cuts through the middle of it, which is kind of important because we have two bridges and the community is around both sides. We're approaching 9,000 residents in the town of Bridgewater, and it is the largest community between Halifax and Yarmouth, which is at the very southern tip of the province along the province's south shore. So it is really the regional hub for services from everything from grocery stores to the regional hospital. Regional offices of all the government services are predominantly located here in Bridgewater. And while we're a community of 9,000 residents, on any given day of the week, whether it's a weekday or a weekend, we're more like 14 to 20,000 people, depending, because people come in to get their groceries or to see a doctor or a lawyer or whatever it might be that they need to do. The regional high school is here, so students from across much of the district of Lunenburg, which is the larger rural area around us, they come to town for high school. And then we also have an elementary and junior high school as well that's just for the residents of the town. We also have the local campus for the Nova Scotia Community College system. So the Lunenburg campus is located here in the town of Bridgewater. The local provincial courthouse is here. So, you know, all of those things are here. But we are in a river valley, which is interesting. So you literally do walk uphill both ways when you're going from one side of the town to the other side, because you walk down over the river and back up the hill on the other side. And so, you know, that has posed problems for people who want to be more active and walk to and from, say, the mall or the hospital or something like that, but they might not want to really walk uphill both ways. Just over 5 years ago, the town started a transit service. So we have a fixed route public transit. It is a single bus and it goes in a single direction in a 1 hour loop around town. And that's helped a lot of people. You know, they might take the bus one way and walk home the other way. So we're seeing sort of our different modes of transportation increase, which is great. And so we do have a small public transit service. It's just within town, although we are looking at ways to expand that service to our neighboring communities. So we're having ongoing discussions with our neighbors. And we also have, you know, the town was incorporated in 1899, but, you know, it had sort of started to grow, you know, spring up as a community. Before that, it had been an important First Nations community before it became an incorporated municipality and had been settled. It is part of Mi'kma'ki, that is the Indigenous community across Nova Scotia, and it's technically within the Acadia First Nation territory. That is the local band that it spans much from just outside of Halifax down to the Yarmouth area. We have it's an interesting community because we're 20 minutes to the coast. So we are surrounded by an incredible amount of beauty, beautiful beaches that people from other more populous areas look at and go, I can't believe there's nobody here. And so Bridgewater has a bit of an identity as being the service, really truly the service center. So when people visit our community, often you've probably heard of the town of Lunenburg. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, beautiful historic architecture, the community of Mahone Bay, the village of Chester. There are these quaint seaside areas that attract a lot of tourists, as do all of our beaches and areas all around town. And Bridgewater, a lot of people, even people who've lived here a long time, they know it mostly as a place where they come in to get gas, get their groceries, and continue on to somewhere else. But in the past 7 years since I've been with the town of Bridgewater, we've really been growing a significant amount. So we're having more people move in. We're having a tremendous amount of development happening. So a lot more housing being built. We're getting a new interchange on the highway. There's more business interest. So we're really in that flux of growth and that challenge that happens between, this was always my sleepy little town, and this is now growing, and there's development proposals for hundreds of residential units or mixed use with commercial on the ground floor. And that's changing people's perception of what Bridgewater is. The other component to it is that the town council has been, despite, it changes every 4 years. So municipal government, like many and many other jurisdictions in Nova Scotia, there's fixed elections, and elected officials it changes every 4 years. Despite that change in who might be representing the town itself has had a commitment to sustainability that dates back well over a decade. And it started with its integrated community sustainability plan in 2008. And then that moved into a municipal climate change adaptation plan in 2011. And much of what was in those plans was then adopted into the town's municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. As well as then when I arrived in 2015, town council had just given direction to create a community energy plan. And so in the course of that work and they decided energy use, energy efficiency was important, and they wanted to explore what was needed beyond just doing energy management plans for town facilities. What did we need to do to address climate change, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions at a community level? And that's what has led us to the project Energize Bridgewater. So that initial work created a community energy investment plan where we really looked at what did we need to do to reduce our energy use and our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. What would we need to do to achieve that? And in 2016, that was a very lofty goal. Now we're all striving for net zero and going further than that. But in 2015, that was a pretty strong target. And through that process, we really looked at the environmental side of community energy and the economic. What was the economic argument for this? And what arose out of that was recognizing and understanding that we had a larger social problem on our hands, which was that 40% of Bridgewater residents were experiencing energy poverty, which at that time was defined as households spending more than 10% of their income on energy needs, for whether that's power, heat, fuel, transportation costs, and that the average household was spending $6,500 a year on energy costs. And that was a shocking moment for us as staff and as our town council. And that's what led us to explore how can we reduce that. That's a significant amount of somebody's income. Average incomes at that point in time, and they haven't changed much since then, and costs of everything have only gone up, but average incomes for a household were $50,000 or just a little bit more than that. If you're spending $6,500 of those dollars on energy costs, that's not your shelter, your total shelter costs. That's not rent or your mortgage or whatever that might be. And we also learned through the census data at the time that over 40% of our residents rent their place of residence. So we have very high rental, very high costs. And we started trying to think about how can we address this? Because if you're not warm in your home, if your house and your housing situation is tenuous, then your own health outcomes are also at risk. And so what role could the town play, and what could we do? And as all of this was sort of coming to a conclusion, and we were thinking about what we could do, how could we act and implement some type of solution at a community and municipal level, the federal government announced the Smart Cities Challenge project. And we thought there might be a way we could find funding to enable us to do something. So we didn't think about data or technology or anything like that as a solution. We were looking at what is the reality that our community is faced with, which is rising and continue to rise, the costs of energy continue to rise, pardon me. So, really high energy bills, and how can we create better conditions in our community? What could municipal government do and influence to sort of support that, to make the community better for everybody living in it? All 8,600, almost 9,000 now. And really, as I've described what the community is like, it's a hardworking community, a lot of lower paying minimum wage or just above minimum wage type jobs. We have a really diverse economy though. We also have like a Michelin tire plant and a lot of, range of manufacturing and other things that happen here in the community, but high rental, old houses, very leaky, poor energy efficiency, and high costs of energy, because predominantly oil heat here. So if your class might not be familiar, but on the East Coast, we have the highest rate of sort of oil and non-electric heat across. So we tend to have the highest rates of energy poverty when you look sort of nationally, because of our dependence on oil. Anyway, I really covered a lot of ground in that introductory paragraph.
And really helpful that you did. People will have an understanding of the context, I guess, of the work that you've been doing. And you did mention there that you noticed that the federal government had their Smart Cities program, the Smart Cities Challenge. You did apply for that. Presumably you were looking at any source that would help you to improve energy poverty, and you saw this as something that might contribute to that. You were successful. You were one of the, I think, 5 cities that were funded by that. 4. Okay, even better. But and you've described why the project is important. You lead that project. What's your job then? What do you do to lead the project?
Right, so I'm the director of the Community Development Department here at the town of Bridgewater. And so that department is responsible for our land use planning and development control for the town, for recreation programming services for the town, as well as our sustainability efforts as well. So the work grew out of that department. It's now been created into its own department of Energize Bridgewater, and I'm the project director for the Energize Bridgewater. So I still hold both hats, director of both. And as director of the Energize Bridgewater project, my responsibility is really about overseeing the entire project. So our application that we submitted, so I'll just give a little bit of background on the overall Smart Cities Challenge process, because they put out a call and they had 3 different categories of 50 million, 2 $10 million, and 1 $5 million prizes. And they were basically really large communities, medium-sized communities, small community. And so we opted to apply for the small community $5 million. We thought our odds were best in that category. We were then picked as a finalist, and we were provided with funding to develop that final application. So we went from concept and our pitch to overseeing the development of that application, which got really detailed. That's available on our website and on the Infrastructure Canada website. And then when we were announced as a winner in 2019, we then went into negotiations with the federal government for the contribution agreement. So we won $5 million. They're deploying this grant in a way that's different than most other grants that any level of government gives, where it's an outcome-based, it's not expense-based. And that's actually really important because the whole program was designed to be outcome-based. And you made reference to that in your initial sort of introduction here, that our project is based on seeing outcomes of lifting our residents out of energy poverty through a series of different solutions and interventions that we envision can do that. So the structure of the grant was then negotiated to be outcome-based as well. So we have to achieve certain milestones in our project, and we receive our funding as we achieve those milestones. So my role as director is looking at the entire project and what are all the pieces. So what type of skills and expertise do we need to achieve the work that we set out? Managing that contract in terms of what are the key core deliverables. We had a large application with a lot of ideas. Some things, as we go through this, we realize that's not the right way. We thought in 2019 that this would be the way that we need to make this part of the project happen. So one very relevant to your class is we thought by hiring, I think the name of the position was an IT systems integration specialist. We had a job description. And we thought by hiring that person, we would be able to do all of our data connected technology ideas just by having one person in that role. That person joined the program in March and departed in December for a different job. We have never been able to refill that position in that original way. And we've realized, so my job is managing all of that and going, okay, we tried that, that didn't work. How else can we achieve the outcomes and the build that part of the project that we need to achieve that or to deploy that solution, and with what resources and within a fixed budget, because we have the $5 million, we have what the town of Bridgewater is putting in, we've accessed additional funding, and we have gone from a 5-year timeframe to a 6-year timeframe because COVID and some of those departures that happened during COVID and through COVID, we've had a lot of staffing changes because of life changes. And so we've had to do a lot of sort of realignment of the project, and we had to rescope it. And that's been my role, sort of realizing we're trying to achieve the outcomes, but we might need to change the mechanisms or the ideas or the solutions as we go along. And we realize that we've tried something and it's not going to work. We're going to adapt. We're going to try something else. We're going to adapt. And we're going to try something else. And that's what we've been doing. And that's my main role. I feel like I'm just a constant problem solver, matching the resources to the end outcome, which has never changed. We're still trying to reduce the energy poverty rate in our community. We're still trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We're still trying to reduce and stabilize energy costs for residents. Those are the 3 core goals of our program. But how we envisioned it in 2019, where we're at today is different, and where we will be at the end of the project will definitely be different also.
It's very helpful that you're describing the real application or the real experience that you've had with this. It's I think it's quite typical, unfortunately, of these types of projects where you hope that things are going to go smoothly, but mostly they don't. And the skill that you need to be able to do this successfully is in dealing with that instability, if you like, of the project. So I know that the project has aspects that involve technology or information technology, and some that don't. And I thought I should ask you just to describe the elements that don't involve technology, so that people can get a good understanding of how you're trying to improve energy poverty?
Absolutely. So we have, and this part of our project has never wavered. You know, when we think, given sort of the description that I've given you, that we have old leaky housing stock and people spending a great deal of their hard-earned money on heat, power, transportation needs. The first part that is really not technological is about making that home more energy efficient. First step, do you have insulation in your walls? My house did not. My house was built in 1874. I live here in town. It did not even have, often in those super old homes, you'll find newspaper or seaweed or corn stalks or birch bark or burlap bags, anything that anybody had when they were building, they would put it in. We didn't have a single thing in our walls when we opened them up. It was just air. So insulation is always the first step when you're looking to energy efficiency, and then you build off that. So the largest part, sort of the engine of our program, is really about the housing retrofits and going beyond just insulation. So sort of going deeper, if we're going to achieve the 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and of homes and of cost, then we need to go deeper than just some of the basics of insulating and maybe going from oil to a heat pump or something like that. So the first core component is that housing energy retrofit. The second, which is perhaps even, it was the first part of our program we were able to get up off the ground, is actually how do we know who's experiencing energy poverty? So we'll take a step back even further. So how do we know who's having these issues? How do we reach out to them and assist them in some way? And so we developed very strong partnerships with our local community service organizations. So that's everyone from literally the Department of Community Services to those providing housing supports within our community. So different nonprofits, people who are helping a variety of different groups within our community. And we spent a lot of time working directly with them about what would be helpful. They are serving the most vulnerable in our community. What would be helpful to them? And through our application process, the community and all of our engagement, they said, we need something called coordinated access. Coordinated access is pretty much what it sounds like. It's about coordinating access to community services for people, so that if you're experiencing energy poverty or any other challenges, and oftentimes what happens is you find out about one thing. So you might be able to get emergency fuel support in the dead of winter. You don't have enough to put oil in your tank, so you might go to an organization that would help you put some oil in your tank. And they might say, oh, look, there's another program for you. Now you need to go over to community group B, and they might be able to help you with something else. And then you might go talk to them and they say, oh, there's somebody else. Now you need to go talk to this other person and they might be able to help you with something else. So how do we coordinate that so the person who is experiencing the greatest hardship only has to tell their story once? And there's a single point of intake, and that coordination they will get those referrals to the services they need. And it's a much broader solution. It's not just about energy poverty. And in fact, energy poverty is our innovation in that coordinated access service delivery model. The coordinated access is something that the National Housing Strategy or Homelessness Strategy at the federal level talks about. It's predominantly an urban center. It does rely on a shared data set where there's the homelessness of individuals and families information system, HIFIS. It is a national, I think it's a software. This is where I'm not technical. Anyway, but it's a national database and tool that is provided to organizations free who are implementing coordinated access. It has its challenges. I don't know enough about it, but it basically allows the organizations that are part of a coordinated access system to share specific information and do referrals between organizations so that the person tells their story once, and then gets the help that they need within their community. It's predominantly an urban urban solution. And we're one of the first rural communities in Nova Scotia to adopt it and bring it to Lunenburg County. So very non-technical, because it's predominantly about providing a person that somebody can come to who's in need and talk to them about their situation, and then maybe find out about the different supports they can get, including energy poverty. So what can be done about that? If they own their home, they can be referred to certain energy efficiency programs. If they are a renter, there might be a way we could talk to the landlord about those sorts of things. So we're trying to develop a better connection into that coordinated access service to then provide the energy efficiency upgrades, which is that how are we going to actually have the outcome is to physically upgrade where people are living. Something that we launched coordinated access in May of this year, and we launched our energy efficiency home. So it's the Energize Bridgewater Home Upgrades program that was launched in December of this year. Something that we launched the program with basically creating a way to put all available programming in a one-door solution. So I'm going to take a step back. In 2019, there was we only had a handful of energy efficiency programs, or in 2018, when we made our pitch, 2019, when our project was approved. Since that time, there's been a lot of change in terms of federal, the Greener Homes Grant was announced. So there's new federal funding, there's new provincial funding programs, all for energy efficiency. There's new federal and provincial goals for greenhouse gas reductions. There's a number of things that changed. And so again, this nature of our project had to change because there's all these new things. So one thing that hasn't changed is that programs get designed as individual programs, and it's just as murky on the home energy upgrade side of things as it might be on a community service side of things, where there's a program for this and a program for that, but not a coordinated intake and a coordinated delivery of those different incentive programs, funding programs. Because the one thing we do know is that it costs a great deal of money to upgrade your home to be more energy efficient. It's not cheap. And if you're experiencing energy poverty, you don't have the money. You probably don't have that money in your pocket. If you can't, if you're struggling to pay your bills, you're not going to have the extra money lying around to upgrade your home. So we're looking at how do we maximize the number of grants that people might be able to access, and then using as much grant money to make the upgrades, and then the municipality will loan the rest at a very low interest rate. So no money comes out of pocket for the individual, and then they would pay whatever is left over that they need to complete all of their upgrades. The municipality will loan at a 1% interest rate for 10 to 15 years, and then they would just pay a small monthly amount. So okay. It's a very large suite of programs, and those are all very like nuts and bolts, like tangible hands-on things. They're not the technology or tech innovation side, data connected tech side of things yet.
I mean, and what I'm hearing there is that, as you said, there are a lot of programs out there that are based on energy poverty that people can access, and are based around climate change and things like that too, probably. But they're disparate. If somebody wanted to apply to all of them, or to identify which ones were appropriate for them, and then go through the process of accessing that's quite complicated, that most people would not be able, probably wouldn't choose, or would not do that. And so what you've established is our resources that basically allow Bridgewater to really to focus and get as much out of these programs for the people who need it as they possibly can. And that seems like basically maximizing the exploitation of the available resources to benefit the people in the community. So that seems like very worthwhile, but at the same time, there's a lot of work there to make that happen. Okay, so then I wanted to move on from that and just ask about the technical parts, the information. What are you going to use information technology for as part of your determination to get everything you can possibly get to focus on energy poverty, yes.
So as part of our original application, and to be a smart city community and an applicant to this program, we needed a data and connected technology component to our project. And it's not that it was an afterthought, it's really about value add. What can data and connected technology do to add value to the solutions that we're trying to implement to reduce energy poverty in our community? Is there a way? And so again, back in 2018, 2019, there was nothing in our local landscape that would assist with that. Things have changed, and I will talk about that. So in our original application, we had a concept that, we could put sensors in homes that would do real-time monitoring of energy usage and help us sort of understand and troubleshoot and verify that the mechanics are working, that the temperature, things aren't working in opposition to each other. So you don't have a heat pump and a baseboard going off at the same time. So those types of things. So we had this vision, and we put that forward as part of how we became a smart city. We're still developing that concept because things have shifted within our local environment. And so we thought by hiring that one person, we'd be able to figure it all out. Well, we have learned that one person there, and I'll just say that's because you had a bunch of planners and policy people trying to think of what the technology. We had some guidance to our application process from a local company that was helping us with some of that technology innovation conceptualization. But we didn't have technology. We didn't have somebody with that training background and expertise on staff until we had that one person. He helped us move the needle, but as with any discipline, the discipline is very big, and you're going to have, expertise in smaller areas of it. So something that I've certainly learned is that there is no one resource in the information technology sector that would be able to do everything for us. So that is one big learning that I've had in this past year. So our concept is that we have an energy management information system. The acronym is EMIS, so we call it EMIS. And that refers to a broad set of tools that monitor, analyze, and control building energy use and system performance. Okay, so that's, the objectives are really about measurement and verification. Did those energy efficient upgrades, did they work? Do we know that, do we know how much energy was used before, how much energy is used now after the fact? Does it continue to keep, the energy efficiency? Does it continue to remain energy efficient? To continue to identify and recommend additional energy saving opportunities. So, we always start with, here it is before we do any upgrades, then we do the upgrades. Are there further, by having more information about energy use in your home, can you make more decisions around how you're using, doing things within your home, the systems you might have, et cetera, to continue to drive those energy savings? And so really it's about enabling residents to make data-informed decisions about their home energy use, right? So it's how do we take what we would be able to know and the data we could get from deploying sensors, or maybe it's some AI and machine learning, to be able to provide information and then interpret that and help residents and homeowners understand what that means so they can make decisions around things to continue to improve their energy savings. So things sort of paused. We got to a certain point in our concept when we had a staff person, and then that person left, and we were unable to fill the role because a small town in Nova Scotia cannot pay larger market rates. We can't compete on a global scale. The, COVID global pandemic happened, and for a lot of IT sector jobs, they could be done from anywhere. So our person left for a much more lucrative role, and he didn't have to move. And as a small municipality where we can't pay market rates, we are we're public sector. We only have, just shy of 9,000 people, and our only way of earning income as a town is through taxes and grants, those sorts of things. So very limited. So we looked to, and we found actually somebody in our local community who's never worked locally. He's worked globally. And we brought him on in an advisory capacity. And so we had to think more broadly about going to consultants, about going to academic partners. So we brought in an IT advisor, and we built a partnership with the community college. And we then refined our concept. We started talking to other municipalities across Canada, and we hired an intern right out of his undergrad. And through that work, we went into not only looking at how things have changed in the landscape, because there were some new evolutions that came out of our local power utility, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then we looked at what our pathway had been at the beginning, and where we kind of needed to go. And we embarked on a proof of concept process where we built the conditions in a lab setting and tested, could we put different types of sensors into a place to monitor the different elements that we feel would be important in a residence: temperature, energy use, power use or electrical use, and other things. Could we then build what type of communications architecture would be needed for those sensors to take the data that they're collecting and put it somewhere for us to access it? Is my very layman terms. And then could we build a database to then run analytics? Like, what are the different types of energy analytics that would provide meaning to a resident, right? Just having a ream of temperature information isn't going to tell me anything. So what are the, it's going to be like, oh, great. It's, I keep my house at 17 degrees. It's telling me that I'm doing a good job at that, or 21 or whatever the temperature might be. So it's about then taking that data and doing something with it. And so we proved the concept. We developed that architecture at a very high level. So what are the devices? What type of communication gateway did we need? How are we collecting the data? What types of data are we collecting? How are we managing that data? What type of privacy and security would we need with that data? And then the analytics and reporting, and then how is the consumer or the resident, how are they going to be accessing it? What does that portal look like? How are they getting that? So we've tested that in a laboratory setting, and we can do it, which is really exciting. We tested different cloud services. We went Amazon versus Microsoft, and the ones that as a municipality, we are bound by really significant provincial and federal legislation around privacy protection, around what data can be in the US. So we had to discount certain things because those cloud services are stored in the US and we're not allowed to put personal data outside of Canada. Things that perhaps you might not, would be important for your students to be very familiar with, because that type of legislation has a big impact even on who we can work with and where they are and how we allow them to access, our networks, or what we might be doing if we're creating something for, a lot of personal information is going to be created through these analytics on your own patterns and habits. How are we protecting that? What is our duty and our due diligence? What are we doing to ensure that the information continues to remain both, private for people, but also in the public good? So, there's a lot of things that we have that we're trying to understand. So we're at a point in our project right now where we know the concept is viable. So we are doing a new scope of work with our partners at the community college. And there's an applied energy research chair and lab that we've partnered with. And so we're going to be moving into the next phase, which will be developing a minimum viable product and then doing some field testing here in Bridgewater. Because as I've said, going back to the description of the town, we're in a river valley. So we need to physically test the communications infrastructure to make sure that it can be seen. Because in my house, I struggle to get cell phone reception in one corner of my kitchen, just simply because of the topography around me and the line of sight to the cell tower that I need. So we have to physically test it. We have to see how it might work in a real world environment before we get to a point where we might be launching something. We are going to be putting out a request for proposals from we know we can't hire a single person who would know how to do user interface and user dashboards, as well as developing the database on the Azure platform, as well as knowing the energy analytics and then how to program those analytics into the back ends. I've learned a lot. I didn't know any of this until about 5 months ago. So we need all these different types of resources. So we're actually going to look at a short-term staffing type of thing where we can have a company basically on a standing offer where we can develop a scope of work under the guidance of our research partner, community college, and the IT advisor, and say, okay, we need, and I'm probably going to say things wrong, but whatever, we need our database built. And so we're going to need X types of resources for 4 weeks to build and test this. We'll have a timeline, that sort of stuff, and we'll purchase those services as we put the building blocks together to create this service. Now, I've alluded to the fact that some things have changed. So if any of your students are from Nova Scotia, they might have heard that Nova Scotia Power, who is our local, we only have one energy utility in the province, it's Nova Scotia Power, or one main one. And they have contracted with a company called Bidgely that is providing a platform called My Energy Insights. And it is an artificial intelligence machine learning platform that is providing any account holder with Nova Scotia Power analytics and a dashboard on their energy use, their power use. I'll be very specific. So it's not all forms of energy, it's just for their electrical power. So one of our tasks as we develop our minimum viable product and start to field test is to then see how does what we're developing compare to what's actually now on offer at no additional cost through the power utility.
Okay, makes sense.
Right, right. So, it sounds simple and it's not. We've had this question for 1.5 years. They launched the service in November of this year. And the initial reaction on social media was like, apparently I used air conditioning in November. And they were just basically suggesting that the algorithms hadn't fully gotten used to the Nova Scotia context, perhaps. That the questionnaire you need to fill out didn't have all the, doesn't have something for wood heat. A lot of homes have wood heat here. May not have, we don't have natural gas for much of the province. You might have propane. Some parts of the province would have natural gas, right? So there's like small nuances that may have a really big impact on the machine, on whatever happens behind the scene that would be spitting out that dashboard for each individual power account saying, this is how the breakdown, you're doing this much laundry and this much cooking and whatever. And they're like, well, I don't have laundry in my apartment, so I don't know why it's saying that, right? So there's some bugs to be worked out. But from our perspective, there's other parts of the home energy environment and equation that wouldn't be captured by electrical, power alone. So we also need to look at, is there a greater benefit of what we're trying to do with our energy management information system? And how does it compare? Will this piece of software from the power utility, will that get us 50%, 80%, 90% of the way? We don't know. The other piece is that the federal government and our provincial government are really pushing off oil. They want to get our homes off oil heat into heat pumps, which is electricity. So if through this transformation process, our big push to improve people's energy efficiency in their homes results in them moving from having oil heat to being, mostly electric, then that's another important part of our assessment of Bidgely will be, if we're moving everybody into a predominantly electrical energy consumption, then does this option through Bidgely, the My Energy Insights opportunity, does that actually provide a lot of what we need for the EMIS that we're developing ourselves? So much information.
No, the information is wonderful, because what it highlights is what the reality of large-scale technical change is. I mean, you've said that it's only part of the overall project, which I think people should bear in mind as they listen to your response to that last question, because what you described just on the technology side is huge. There are many aspects to that you need to consider, and many challenges you need to overcome to be able to make it work effectively. And what is fascinating, I think extremely valuable to the people listening or watching, is that you've described all of the challenges that you have, and they all seem like, very reasonable or challenges we might expect given what you're dealing with. And at the same time, you're describing the solutions to all of those challenges too. So you've had these big challenges to deal with, and you're dealing with all of them. And there's a lot for people to learn from this. I think it's going to be valuable for other communities to look at what you've done, and because they're going to face the same sorts of issues. Although, of course, you're developing things here that it's probably other people are going to be able to take and implement easier than you. They're not going to have to go through that development, but fascinating to have that detail. It's very helpful.
Actually, if I could, I'll just say that one of the core requirements of the Smart Cities Challenge Canada process is that whatever the winning projects were, all the projects have to be transferable and scalable. So our solutions really must be to the benefit of any other community, right? So as you said that, we're addressing all these issues, and we're coming up with solutions, and we're testing all these different things. And ultimately, all the learning that we're doing will be passed on to whomever else across Canada, is interested in following and taking on. So, we do feel, and that's a frame of reference as we're thinking about the energy management information system. It's what can be done and replicated in other communities. And I forgot an important point that was a major decision point, which is that we had to be sure that whatever our communications architecture and the technology choice was, that it could operate without internet, that it could operate without Wi-Fi. Because if you're experiencing poverty or energy poverty, you may not have internet. So we needed to choose. So we've gone with a LoRa network. Again, don't ask me the specifics, but anyway, it's like a low range. I don't know. I won't even bother trying to say exactly what it is, but it does not require that people have internet in their home to participate. So that is something. They don't have to have data on their phone. Well, they would have They would probably have to, we haven't gotten to the interface, the user interface component. So that is a whole other piece. But in terms of the sensors being functional within a dwelling, internet is not required. So.
And the federal government is getting all this for $5 million, which seems like that this is a very good use of taxpayer money. I mean, I'm very happy for whatever proportion of my taxes are contributing towards this, because very clearly the benefits of this $5 million, given that this is something that's going to be able to be used in other communities, the amount of return for that 5 million is potentially extremely large. So good on the government for spending our money this way. This is very good. So I also wanted, I guess it's maybe a narrower question, though maybe not, to be able to get all this to happen. You've got to get technologists and non-technologists to work together. And this is a challenge for lots of people. So I thought I would ask you about how you've managed to get that to happen effectively.
Well, as I've sort of talked a little bit around, it's been very up and down through our process. It was interesting because in the early days, I mean, it's very hard to find people in the technology sector who would want to help us figure out the concept and not be able to be the provider of the solution, if that makes sense. Because we are a public body and we are bound, we have received public funding, we have to use public procurement processes and follow best practice in procurement. And so we couldn't have, we couldn't contract somebody to help us develop the concept and then turn around and hand them all the work in the end, if we need to put out a public call to tender the work or whatever the solution is. And so we kept running up against having conversations with people, and they'd be like, well, we would want to be able to bid on actually doing the work. And we would have to say, well, then we can't talk to you anymore. And so it was actually really hard because I am a non-technologist and I really don't know the language, the lingo, anything. I've been on a very big learning curve in the past year. It was really hard to find people to talk for me to be able to learn enough to have even more productive conversations with other potential partners, which is why turning to the community college and other public sector bodies for partnership has been so critical to our success. It also, further reinforces that our learning will remain in the public sector and remain sort of to be applied. Not to say that private sector is not doing things for public good, but that it just really assures us and helps us maintain that requirement that what we're doing is to remain in the public. And so that's been really interesting. Bringing, technologists and non-technologists together there's going to be more of that as we progress through the minimum viable product, especially as we think about how we want the end users to interact with the technology. So that's very high on our radar, that in the next few months, we'll be having many more conversations with our target users around what will be useful to them when, if they're going to be getting this, if we're going to be developing this technology, what will be useful? What are the places where they might be fearful of it? There may be people who are going to say, absolutely no way, there's too much surveillance, I want nothing to do with this, you're going to know too much about me. Or there's questions of, how will this technology work in a multi-unit building? Who has access? Does the landlord have access to this? Like, there's so many questions, and there's so much value at bringing the non-technology people into conversations with the technologists that we need to create these solutions, because you can find the technical solution really easily, and it may be very unpalatable to the person who needs to use it. We, as part of our process, we had the technical expertise develop a concept document, very detailed, sort of explaining the overall approach to not only the energy upgrades component, but then this data and connected technology aspect of the energy management information system. So once we had that concept, I took that to the executive director of the South Shore Open Doors Association, which is the organization, the community partner that does the coordinated access and works with the people who are housing insecure. They're the ones at risk of losing their housing because they can't pay their power bill. And I said, can you please read this and tell us where the issues might be from your part, like your client perspective, who are our target end users. And so having that view, that's where she said you can't guarantee there will be internet, or that the internet will be on all the time, right? You can't, you are going to, how will the landlords have access? Like, she started raising all of these questions that we really need to pull into our overall, solution development. And having that at not quite at the very beginning, because we developed our concept and then had her, but before we started developing the technical solutions, we had that input. We had that non-technical review to say, these are the issues that I foresee that you want this, part of our residents to use it, this group of people. These are the challenges they face, and these are the questions I foresee, or the barriers I foresee. And then that helped shift our entire pathway. So it's so important to bring those two groups together, because I also think, oh, shouldn't it be this easy? And I have no concept. To me, it's like a black box of what the technology or the technical expertise then is like, oh no, it needs to have X, Y, Z, or needs to go through these 5 processes before you could spit out at the end what I think is simple, and it's not. So it's really important that you have both groups, from my perspective, through this whole solution building.
Okay, very important, and we stress heavily at Waterloo the need to do what you've described, getting out, talking to users, making sure that the types of challenges you've mentioned are identified and addressed in projects, and often it doesn't happen, and so your description of that is very helpful to reinforce that argument. As far as I've got a few more questions, and I'm very conscious of your time, so I don't want to disrespect that. At the same time, if you like, I'll just keep going.
Sure, I'll try to keep my responses more brief.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, your responses are great, but because there's such value in all the responses. But another thing I wanted to understand was that you've used a number of funding sources to be able to make this happen, and I just wondered if there was any guidance that you would have for people based on that.
That is a very interesting question. Not really. Okay, and not to be super short. It's interesting. We have two main funding sources right now. One, obviously, the $5 million from Smart Cities. The other funding source that we have is through the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, and that's specifically to help us develop the energy management information system. Because there's a potential sort of economic development component to what we're doing. And there's sort of developing that innovation and technology aspect, and where could it go? We're not entirely sure. So they came in to help fund this project, which is really great. We've accessed a lot of small little grants for internships and to bring on staff. So we have from, Nova Scotia, we have a co-op funding program to help us hire co-op students from Nova Scotia universities. But there's other larger grants from like Eco Canada and other federal sources that can support us in bringing on like a 6 months to 1 year positions for new graduates and things like that. So there's a tremendous number of programs that help support a person to come in and do work, and also especially early in their career, and help build their skills. Some of those funding streams also come with money for professional development and skill building and ongoing support in that way. So for potential future projects or employers, all of those funding programs to bring in new graduates, like there's a ton of different ones, and a lot are focused on not just sort of the science, technology, environment, or engineering and the STEM fields, but also ones to focus on supporting international students continuing on in Canada, so new immigrants or refugees. Like there's a wide range. So there's a really to try to find as many of those programs as possible to help you bring in the technical expertise you might need. And that's one aspect of the funding. The other funding sources, I mean, we've also done a lot of like cold calls and pitches to different levels of government to say, hey, can you help fund this? And sometimes they've jumped at it, and other times they've said, nah, come back when you have more to show us. So just takes a lot of persistence on the funding and grant side of things.
Yeah, I can imagine. As because dealing with so many different sources alone is it takes a lot of work. What's I'll ask a broad question. What do you see it? What is the biggest challenge for the project?
So reflecting on the past 3 years, my biggest challenge has been people and resources. And it's been mostly from I will be completely honest, starting from a place of naivety. We've never had a project of this size and scale that's not been like a construction, a road building, or upgrades. We did a massive downtown revitalization project in 2016, 2017 that involved digging up the pipes, replacing pipes, and rebuilding the street, and that sort of stuff municipalities are very good at. We can handle large multi-million-dollar projects of that scale. A large multi-million-dollar project that is trying to transform our community, that's policy-driven, that requires significant partnerships with other organizations. We didn't set ourselves up correctly, like in terms of a structure within our organization. And we didn't necessarily match the human resources to the work at hand very well to start. And then there was a global pandemic that shifted a ton of things for us. And nobody anticipated that in 2019. And I myself am also getting tired of COVID and everybody saying, oh, the pandemic happened, but that really was a very large challenge for us, because at one point we hired somebody who lived in Ontario who indicated he would come and move here, but was unable to. So we had him 100% remote for a period of time, but we actually need him here. So he left the project because he wasn't able to physically come. We've had a lot of turnover in staff, as we've had people, we can't offer a permanent role on a relatively short-term project. We don't know what the future of Energize Bridgewater will be when the funding runs out. We don't know if it will remain a municipal project. Will it continue at all? Or will it become a separate organization, or will another level of government take it on? We don't know. So we're not offering people a permanent job, we're offering terms. And because of that, people have, found a new opportunity that might be more permanent. We had a number of people join our project who had never lived in such a small community before. They relocated to come here and they realized, I'm an urbanite, I need to get out of here. We had one person come who had, lived globally. And was like, there's, under 30 looking for more. It was COVID. There was very little opportunity to join organizations, to meet people. There was no community for that person here. And so they left for another much larger community where they would have more opportunity, both in their area of expertise, but also in terms of what our community can provide. So if you're, so people really are our biggest challenge. They're also our biggest asset. And we have had, despite the fact that some people have come for a short time and then moved on, everybody who's contributed to our project has been amazing, and has helped move the work forward. So it wasn't, we assembled a team and that team remained, the same, and we're just barreling through the work. We've had a lot of change. And so that constant onboarding and offboarding of people and that transfer of knowledge and, retraining of skills, human resources is absolutely what I spend most of my time addressing and trying to build. But we have, right now, our team, it's continuing to grow a little bit. That's the other thing, is that it sort of comes and goes depending on the stage at which we might be at in the project. And the time is ticking. We have a very firm end date. So that's also, as we're getting closer to that end date, it's becoming sort of harder to sort of envision, well, what is the team now? What do we need in 6 months? What will we need come the end of the team? And how do we grow and taper that at the same time?
Yeah, and I think other projects that are engaged in technological change of some kind will face similar challenges about, assembling resources at the times that those are needed, and dealing with the challenges of being able to do that. That's big. Okay, just two further questions then.
Okay.
This project is applying technology for public good in Bridgewater. Do you see other things that you might do with technology there?
Yes, actually, to be honest, the light bulb moment of us looking to a different type of communications architecture for the energy management information system is going to provide us with way more opportunities to apply and use that same type of architecture. So just the sensors talking to, collecting data, to analytics and reporting. As we've been working with the city of Calgary, and they've been providing us with excellent guidance and advice. We're working with Open North, a nonprofit out of Toronto, I think it's out of Toronto, that's in partnership with Evergreen Canada. And they, Evergreen and Open North, have a contract to support the Smart Cities Challenge participants. Yeah, I'll have to look them up. I can't remember exactly what they do off the top of my head, but they do a lot of, they've been helping to provide us with guidance on sort of how we are managing the public good side of things. But anyway, so we've been learning about, we might be able to apply what we're learning with the energy management information system to monitoring our wastewater system for the town, to monitoring, water levels in the river, to you name it. I feel like there might be You know, we're not necessarily there organizationally at this point, but when we come out the other side of our developing the minimum viable product and field testing things, we might be able to see the larger application of this structure that we're setting up to other areas that provide challenge to our community and our organization and the services that we deliver organizationally, because we provide safe, clean drinking water. We, you know, provide wastewater, you know, removal and treatment and you know, all those sorts of things that we do for our community. So.
And it seems like you're developing expertise that would enable you then to be able to go and do these things, right? Yeah. Which can only be good. Okay, last question.
Okay.
The people who will be watching this might be moving into the workforce soon, many of them. So I thought I would ask you what you, as an employer, would look for in the technologists that you work for, which of course will give them good guidance on what they should focus on.
So, you know, it's going to be a very non-technological response. To be honest, communication, the ability to explain the technology and to help people understand what it is and how it applies and how to use it. That's actually one of the biggest things that I look for. Like, you might be able to just do it all, but if you can't explain it to me as a non-technical person, I'm not going to know anything about what you're doing, and I'm not going to be able to help. I'm not going to be able to manage. I'm not going to be able to, you know, to champion the work and bring it forward through my organization. Like, I'm going to be at a loss of understanding what it is if you can't communicate it to me. So that's actually a really, from my perspective, that's one of the most important things, is being able to explain it to me, who knows nothing.
And you know, I talk often with engineers around these topics, and and this seems to me to be something that has always been important, but seems to be getting more important as we're engaging in projects of this type that are that have a short time scale, that are involving many different activities and capabilities. The ability to participate in that, it becomes much more important.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jessica. This is really, really valuable. You know, I really do appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. I really wasn't sure. I felt like, as a non-technical person, I wouldn't be of value, but I think the discussion between both the technical and the non, and how to apply it in the real world, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it with you, because it's obviously very close to me right now. So thank you.